Arius, the moment he saw the writing on the hide, immediately realized what it was. Not that he had invented it himself, but when he was a young boy, he went through a phase of fascination with ciphers. One of his teachers introduced him to various methods. The first he learned was a simple system of 2 wheels with letters written around the edge. They could be rotated to assign a real letter to a ciphered one, or a thin strip wound around a stick and written on. To read it, one had to wind it around an identical stick. Later, Arius began inventing ciphers himself, but his professor always cracked them in a single evening, sometimes even with just a glance. Until one day, Arius had an epiphany. He created a cipher that, as he thought, could not be broken. He decided to create his own alphabet and assign to each letter a new sign known only to him. No one else would know which sign corresponded to which letter, so they wouldn't be able to read the text. Proud of himself, he wrote a letter to the professor, pouring out his frustration and not sparing unkind words. He'll never read this anyway, he thought. It seemed terribly funny to him. The next day, he received a reply. In the letter it said, "Thank you for the following letter," and then the decoded content of his text, transcribed in the ordinary alphabet. At the end, the professor added one sentence. "I must, however, note that I don't entirely agree with some of these of this letter." Arius was defeated. For a moment, he even suspected the teacher of some foul play. How else could he have guessed it? After all, it existed only in Arius's head. So he tucked his tail and went to the professor with an apology and a request to explain the mystery. The solution turned out to be remarkably simple, although Arius admitted he would never have figured it out on his own. Namely, letters appear in a text with varying frequency, some more often, others less. By comparing the frequency of symbols in the ciphered text with those from other known documents, one could, through trial and error, rather quickly determine which sign meant which letter. The method works best with longer texts, and Arius's letter was not short. This method of encryption was known, but contrary to what Arius had thought, it was, in fact, quite easy to break. The message he was now trying to decipher was much shorter, but still, as he thought, long enough, yet nothing worked. Discouraged, Arius sat on a stump. Was the message double encrypted? He wondered. Something wasn't right. He noticed that as many as 5 words ended with the same letter. Possible, but in the common tongue, rather rare. But there was one language where such a situation was normal, even expected. Arius pondered. He needed a comparative text to determine letter frequency. He doubted the old man had anything like that in his chest, but he himself knew a few texts by heart, again thanks to the professor. He wrote a few fragments on the board, although he had to ask Balabina for help. He did a little mental calculation. This time everything quickly clicked, and Arius had the ready text. In Latin, of course. He read it aloud, mostly for effect, because he didn't think anyone besides Balabina here understood that language. Meta septentrionalis confirmata est, adduc duas centurias ad oculum, tribus noctibus ante magnum. Then he translated, "Northern target confirmed. Bring 200 to the eye, 3 nights before the great." Damn, he cursed. This doesn't make much sense. After a moment of silence, Corin spoke. On the contrary, this makes a lot of sense. Northerners and I are names the sheep use for us and the green water pond. The great, or rather the great one, is the day when the full moon is also the largest. But it's hard to say exactly when that will be, because for a few days it looks almost the same. You mean the perigee? Asked Arius. I don't know if that's what I mean, Corin growled. Could you speak like a human? It will be. Arius closed his eyes, thought for a moment. In 43 days, he added, explaining nothing more. How do you know? Corin kept asking. Well, probably everyone knows that. Arius snapped, to avoid explaining. Prince, one day I'll punch you in the face for those remarks of yours, and then you won't be so handsome and eloquent, Corin said irritably, but didn't argue with the response. After all, it was common knowledge that Arius knew things others had no idea about, and he was usually right. The peas ran out and the women went back to their tents. The show Arius gave in the tent made an impression on Marianna. However, this time, she wasn't sure what to think. One thing was a handsome, young warrior, maybe speaking a bit strangely, but what she had just seen scared her a little. These were the kinds of things she imagined mages dealt with in their castles atop mountains, or wherever they lived, especially when he recited that spell fluently in some strange melodic language. What secret is he hiding? She wondered. Arius came back later because he stayed at the meeting called by Corin after decoding the message. It was determined that there was a high risk of attack. When he appeared, Marianna decided to ask him a few questions. "Arius, how do you know such things? Those strange writings and languages?" she asked. "Well, in my childhood I wasted a lot of time sitting through all kinds of boring lessons," he replied, as usual, explaining nothing. It didn't look like he wanted to say more. So Marianna decided to ask about something else that had been bothering her. Part of the tent was separated by a tightly tied curtain. She wondered what was behind it. "Arius, what's behind that curtain?" she asked. "Behind the curtain? No one is allowed to look there under any circumstances. And if someone does look," she pressed, "the consequences will be serious," he replied with such firmness that she wasn't sure whether he was joking. She didn't push further and changed the subject to something a bit lighter. "Arius, are you some kind of man from across the sea with a dark secret and unknown intentions? Can I trust you? When you say you love me, are you really not lying? And why would I do that?" Arius asked, sounding completely innocent. The question threw her off a bit. Honestly, he had a point. He had complete power over her. He could do whatever he wanted. He didn't need to pretend anything. "I don't know. Strange people can have strange reasons." "Arius, I'm not sure you're not some kind of sorcerer pretending to be an ordinary man. I'm a little scared of you," Marianna said uncertainly. Arius stepped closer and gently took her face in his hands. She saw something in his eyes, real, deep concern, the kind she had never seen in him before. "I don't want you to be afraid of me," he said softly. Then, after a moment, he added, "I know I'm a bit strange. I know I sometimes do peculiar things, maybe even hard to understand. But the truth is, I'm just a regular guy. You know very well that I can be pierced with a sword or a spear, I can bleed out. And most importantly, like any normal guy, I spend all my time flirting with the girl I love." He looked into her eyes, and once again, Marianna saw that flicker of sadness in his. A second later, Arius smiled slightly and added, this time in a more typical, playful tone, "And if you think I might be a sorcerer, well, as you know, there is a way to find out. Maybe it's worth a try?" "Are you suggesting I should be the one to do it?" Marianna asked, now calmer after his sincere little speech. "Great idea," Arius agreed with a glint in his eye. "Besides, as you probably remember, virginity out on the steppes can be dangerous," he added with a teasing smile. "I'm guessing you'd like to do something about that," she said, glancing away. "I'm glad we're on the same page," Arius smiled. "Stop talking so weird," she laughed. I think this is the moment when I kiss you and you don't object," he said quietly, looking straight into her eyes. "Then what are you waiting for?" By morning, Arius was lying in bed. He wasn't sleeping. Marianna, on the other hand, slept like a rock, her head resting on his chest. Drool flowed from her slightly open mouth. Arius dipped his finger in the drool and drew invisible patterns on his chest. All night they had been wild, playful, and chattering. I really wore her out, he thought, not without pride. Let her rest. He, however, couldn't sleep. A moment later, Balabina entered the tent. "Maybe it would be worth knocking?" "You can never be sure you won't see too much," he said, a little irritated, but in a whisper so as not to wake Marianna. "Oh, forgive me, my boy, but I've seen the details of your divine body so many times," Balabina replied just as quietly. "Allow me to point out that that was a long time ago." "A lot could have changed since then," Arius replied sarcastically. "I see you got what you wanted," she said, pointing to the sleeping Marianna. "Don't say it like it's something bad. It was the best day of her life." Such exemplary modesty, Balabina mocked. "Mine too. It was the best day of our lives. Now we are husband and wife. I will never leave her." Balabina smiled sadly. She knew why Arius was saying that, and how hard it would be for him to keep that promise. "What are you actually doing?" she asked, changing the subject and pointing to the patterns he was drawing with his finger on his chest. "It helps me focus my thoughts and calms me down," Arius replied. They sat in silence for a while. "Ari," Balabina began slowly, still whispering. "I don't think your father is behind this." She moved on to the topic she actually wanted to discuss. "I wasn't considering that," he replied quickly, although he knew perfectly well why she had said it. I don't think the project is at that stage yet, and besides, he promised he wouldn't interfere, he added after a moment. Most likely it's a third party. He continued, if it really is some competition, their goal might be to take over or shut down the project. And this letter implies that they are also aware of me. Unless you can suggest another reason why someone, here, on the northern steppe, at the very edge of the world, would use Latin to encrypt messages. No, I can't, Balabina admitted, though I've thought about it. But if that's what happened, then honestly, it wouldn't be all that surprising. You must admit we haven't blended perfectly into this society. Everyone on the steppe knows who the Prince of the House of the Eagle is, and not just because of his mastery with the sword, but also due to his various odd behaviours. You know that it was necessary. Either way, we need more data. Maybe it really is just an incredible coincidence. Let's hope the meeting at the Greenwater clears things up. Have you considered leaving the camp earlier? If this operation is directed against you, then if you aren't here, perhaps there won't be any reason to attack. I'm not sure if this is all just my paranoia. After all, it is hard to believe some third party could have been involved in this. I don't want to leave the Corios if it turns out to be just some ordinary local matters. I still hope that's what we're dealing with. Marianna slowly woke up and saw Arius. She smiled radiantly. He smiled back. They kissed passionately. She looked the other way, and then she saw Balabina. She groaned in embarrassment and hid her head under the covers. Marianna, I just brought you a needle and I'm leaving now, Balabina said, laughing.